favorite tech tool you can't live without, and one you secretly wish we never had.
I don't think I can live without ChatGPT. And one that I wish never existed, it's probably also ChatGPT.
Nice.
Okay.
I think for me, something I can't live without today is probably Canva. So I came from a consulting background, PPTs, etc. I had to do a lot of unlearning, and now I'm too used to Canva to switch to anything else. And something I wish that didn't exist, probably my PlayStation, was quite addicted. And if it didn't exist in the first place, it saved me a lot of time.
I would say rather than an aha moment, it was more of a case where perseverance meets ambition. Our question was like, why can't the solution be from India? Why can't we make tech for this? Why does it have to be the same, for lack of a better word, the same old kind of companies charging an arm and a leg and then, doing something which is, can definitely have a lot of efficiency or improvement. So that was where the tea leaves and the crumbs of the idea started. And then what we are now or where we are now, right, is not what we thought or we, like you said, came in a dream to us, but it was kind of sticking with it. And understanding our main goal and ambition was to make software that helps large companies be more sustainable.
I remember speaking to a customer at one point, which was it was actually a hospital. And at the end of the conversation, the person actually assumed I was trying to sell him an ECG machine.
Nice.
After speaking about ESG for the longest period of time, which is where there's a definite information awareness gap, right, that we had to solve for. We do sort of break it down fairly simply in terms of the other advantages that come with ESG, right? One is obviously the reputational gain that the company has. Secondly is the operational efficiency that it can bring into an organization, right? Because if you're sustainable, you are using everything more conservatively, right? And you're doing a lot of reusing and recycling, which at the end of the day does cut down your costs. Right? And thirdly, we were also able to sort of showcase the financial incentives that lie today in the market with regards to ESG, right? So you're looking at instruments like SLLs, right? Sustainability linked loans, where companies today can actually go ahead and set a sustainability target, right? And get a haircut on interest rates.
Yeah, I think this argument about sustainability is it's difficult to say it off the bat because you'll hear these kind of one-liners. What about the batteries in the EV cars? And is that really sustainable? The concept of systems thinking, which is what sustainability is built on, is there are trade-offs. Yes, it's not the best to dispose a lithium battery, but it's actually better than burning petrol for 15 years or 20 years, which is the life cycle, right? What is the emissions of what I'm doing currently, and what is the emissions of X thing? And is the overall emissions over the life cycle of that X thing, is it less or more, right? That's how I make a decision. And that's how I go on a decarbonization path.
I think it's fairly straightforward, right? In an ideal world, we'd have one single regulatory framework that's standardized and everybody could report across. But you're absolutely correct in the way today how ESG reporting really works and how the governance structure also is. It's an alphabet soup, right? So I can be a listed Indian entity today that has to put out a BRSR report to SEBI, right? But I also might be exporting product to Europe, which might have me comply with CSRD and CBAM requirements, right? Mm-hmm. I might have a global presence with offices, let's say just a small office in California, which then makes me comply with their 253, 261 requirements, right? I might be in the UAE where I again have to comply with Decree 11, right? But what's really funny is that this alphabet soup, there's a lot of similarities as well, right? So there's a lot of overlapping data across these frameworks, while some factors continuously change, right?
So, welcome, Karan and Shaayak, to the Three Techies Banter podcast. It's an absolute pleasure having both of you here. And to start off with, I just wanted to ask you, let's rewind to your aha moment, right? What was that one moment, or perhaps many moments, when you thought, hey, let's build this? And hey, the world needs this. When did this happen for you all?
So I don't think it was a aha moment in the sense that it came to me in my dreams one day or Shaayak in his dreams one day. I think it's a culmination of just working in the sustainability space over time and sort of witnessing a lot of problems, right? So I was working at KPMG as an ESG consultant, right? And we are working on end-to-end sustainability for a number of large clients, all the way from telecom giants to global conglomerates, right? Large Indian companies as well. And what I really started to notice was whether it was impact, right, which is on ground data management, or whether it was overall sustainability in ESG reporting, data was heavily fragmented, right? So this was when I was doing the integrated report for a pretty massive telecom giant in India, right? You would look at some data points and disclosures and say, okay, this data probably lies with the HR team, right? And then you would have that discussion with the POC there, right? Who has no idea about that particular data set, and they'd redirect you to finance, right? And then you're actually having to speak to 13, 14 different stakeholders across departments to get a response to a single data point. So there was a lot of high effort for low outcome objectives, right? Something that should be fairly simple to achieve. And as a consultant, you want to be driving strategy, right? But majority of my time was spent on data management, reporting across an alphabet soup of frameworks, right? And we weren't really able to create the change or drive impact within that organization. Similar situation happened with impact as well. So when you're on ground, you're doing large scale CSR projects, right? So I was doing a CSR project that was split across 200 locations, right, within India, so all rural communities. And when we really went down for a field audit, right, we could see that the Excel templates that we would get, which were always delayed by months, right? So Jan's data would come to me by Feb end, for example, right, did not match the records that they were actually taking down physically, right? So in today's day and age, we still had data on registers that was then being copied onto Excel, then being sent to KPMG consultants, right, who would clean up that data and make sense of it. And at the end of the day, you go down and conduct an audit and you realize the data doesn't even match, right? There's a huge problem to solve. So I think a lot of these problems that we were seeing across, so it wasn't just one company, right? Across a bunch of companies, diversified across industries, was an indicator. And that's when I reached out to Shaayak. And Shaayak himself obviously was facing similar issues. He was looking at it more from sort of global and multilateral lens, and he'd probably be able to touch upon that better. But I think it just clicked for both of us.
I think 100%. I don't know. I think Karan is right when he says there was no aha moment. Right? I don't think there was ever an aha moment. In fact, Karan and I are accidental entrepreneurs. We are friends first entrepreneurs, maybe second or third. Right? We were part of the same group of boys, as they call it, in college, and we had a lot of fun times together. So it was more of a confidant relationship that we had with each other. And I would say rather than an aha moment, it was more of a case where perseverance meets ambition. Our question was like, why can't the solution be from India? Why can't we make tech for this? Why does it have to be the same, for lack of better word, the same old kind of companies charging an arm and a leg and then, doing something which is, can definitely have a lot of efficiency or improvement. So that was where I would say the tea leaves and the crumbs of the idea started. And then what we are now, or where we are now, right, is not what we thought, or we, like you said, it came in a dream to us, but it was kind of sticking with it. And understanding our main goal and ambition was to make software that helps large companies be more sustainable. So as the requirements and as our organization became more and more serious, right, it's kind of narrowed down our focus to what matters and what is actually helping and providing value to our customers. That would be maybe how we came in.
So you guys started in 2022, and as entrepreneurs and startups, those are really the first year is really, I think, a sense of blur, excitement, lots of things happening, all of that. Were there any moments in that year when you felt like we started here, but maybe we need to pivot there, or this is what we thought were really the issues, but no, hey, there are larger issues or there are smaller issues which need tackling? What happened in that first 1 or 2 years of starting Breathe ESG?
I think Sheetal, that phase is still going on. And Karan, you'll also have an interesting. I think Karan and me are the ones who have seen it, from a
Yeah.
PPT to all the way to an actual
Correct.
tech product. Right, our tech product was a PPT, and if you click the right button, it'll go to the right slide. I mean, that's how it always starts. But something that really was important in the first year, I don't know if pivot is the right word, because Sheetal, we've not pivoted from the day we started in terms of what we're broadly solving. But second part of what you said, that process still goes on to this day, where we may have been barking up the wrong tree. I think, especially, like, it always feels like in the previous 6 months, we've made more progress than all the time leading up to that. Like, I would say we've made more progress since, Feb or March than we did from 22 to Feb. So that definitely, the growth definitely becomes exponential after a point. But focusing down on the first year, I think it took us a lot longer to find out where we were going wrong, possibly. And I'm sure Karan also has some interesting stories, but we learned a lot. Like, a lot of those mistakes were necessary for us to really double down on the stuff we want to do in-house, the stuff that we don't want to do, which is also very important, and being able to say no to certain things. So again, rather than pivoting, we actually reduced or narrowed down our focus on what we do.
Yeah, no, I agree with Shaayak, especially on the point of barking up the wrong tree, right? And in terms of year zero, and when we started, I remember before ESG actually, right, or simultaneously with ESG, we had a product called Breathe Impact, right, that we eventually totally did away with. And I'm glad we did away with it fairly quickly as well, right? We didn't spend too much time on it for a couple of reasons, right? One is it allowed us solely to focus on one singular problem, which was sustainability management, right? Secondly, I think when you do a deep dive, right, on impact, you also realize that the market itself doesn't exist, right? So even though India has the regulations around CSR, on, for example, 2% profits, only 5% of those profits, right, or your CSR budget, according to the regulation, can be spent on administrative expenses, right? And majority of the companies barely make it past that mark, and then the larger companies already have their shit sorted. So yeah, I don't think we were solving a problem with impact, or a large enough problem. And pivoting completely to sustainability allowed us to really deep dive, right? That's why after ESG, we've been able to further deep dive with a product like Zero, which looks at scope 3 and net zero. So yeah, I think we've, like Shaayak said, we've not pivoted, but we've definitely barked up some wrong trees.
So, I mean, just given the newness of the area and obviously your youngness, if that was a word, so how do you kind of go and explain ESG uh, to people who think it's just another way of spending money and they won't get any benefit? I mean, what's the simple definition, and what's the thing that kind of clicks in their mind that say that, okay, I should get into this because I see some payoff? Because otherwise they think it's just some fancy scoreboarding or something that large multinationals do and stuff like that. So how do you explain and convince people?
I mean, firstly, I'm lucky if especially in the early days, if the customer knows what ESG is, right? Forget the problem that they're looking at it as a cost center, not something that's strategic, etc. Right? I remember speaking to a customer at one point, which was it was actually a hospital, and at the end of the conversation, the person actually assumed I was trying to sell him an ECG machine. Right?
Nice.
After speaking about ESG for the longest period of time, which is where there's a definite information awareness gap, right, that we had to solve for. But otherwise, itself, right, if a consumer is aware of what sustainability is, right, but may not think it's for them because they look at it as a cost center, they say, अगर मेरा compliance नहीं है मैं क्यों करूं, right? That's one question that sort of comes up. We do sort of break it down fairly simply in terms of the other advantages that come with ESG, right? One is obviously the reputational gain that the company has. Secondly is the operational efficiency that it can bring into an organization, right? Because if you're sustainable, you are using everything more conservatively, right? And you're doing a lot of reusing and recycling, which at the end of the day does cut down your costs, right? And thirdly, we were also able to sort of showcase the financial incentives that lie today in the market with regards to ESG, right? So you're looking at instruments like SLLs, right? Sustainability linked loans, where companies today can actually go ahead and set a sustainability target, right? And get a haircut on interest rates, right? You also look at project financing for sustainability initiatives or even things like green bonds, right? That were attractive to companies. But yeah, you also need to tell them that it's a journey, right? I can't walk into a bank tomorrow and procure an SLL, right? Unless I've been managing my data, right, and been actively working on sustainability for the longest period of time. I think another thing Shaayak can interestingly probably touch upon is also the gains that come from not just the lending side, but from equity financing and what investors today look at, right, with regards to sustainability. And in addition to that, what customers also are looking for, right? We've had some interesting experiences on that front as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Samiran, it's more about at the end of the day, you're right. While we are young, right? The good thing is we are very clear about what we are doing. So either Karan or myself or our organization, we have no problem telling the CFO of a multi-billion dollar multinational they're doing something wrong if they're doing something wrong. And that's what people are coming to us for also. At the end of the day, if they come to us saying that it's just a cost center, it's usually because their understanding of what we're helping them do is limited. Right. The costs, first of all, are quite negligible if you're thinking about setting up such kind of processes, right? You don't really think about the costs of, let's say, your HR or your finance or your legal, right? Now, ESG or sustainability is essentially the same thing. It's not something that happens on PPTs, right? It's not something that you can just write like a nice, policy and it's done. It's millions and billions of rows of data, right, that directly affect your share price, that directly affect your compliance and government regulation, that directly affect your tax, right, and that directly affect, finally, at the end of the day, how your company is viewed by your customers. So when your customers are asking for it, when your investors are asking for it, and when the regulator or the government is asking for it, right? If you're like at the end of the day, we do tell them that either you're coming to me now or you're coming to me in 1 year in a much more sad situation, right? So it's more about clearly pointing to them the requirements. And then, Samiran, another important thing is ESG is not the same for everybody. So while ostensibly it seems like a cost center, right? It's important to start small and keep building. For example, a chemicals company, no matter if it's just a single factory owned by a family in South Bombay, or it's like BASF or Dow Jones or something like that. Dow's, not Dow Jones. They are part of a global value chain that requires ESG as a basic necessity. So these kind of factors also do play a huge role. It's much more nuanced than just a checkbox compliance. So oftentimes, like Karan said, it's educating them clearly basis their size or industry, pointing them to the drivers that are applicable for them, of which there are many. And then the last thing is, another assumption that you make is a lot of people are not aware. The challenge that we've seen is people at the top want to do it, but they're not really, beyond the fact that ESG is important and companies have to focus on it, they're not really sure how to operationalize it. And then folks at the ground level, of course, are running around doing a lot of things. This becomes an extra aspect on their plate. So that, again, is a huge reason why service providers, solution providers like us have to exist, because you need to bridge the gap within the organizations where there's a real challenge. The problem is not that people at the top don't want to do it and that becomes a barrier for us to enter, but the people at the top and the people at the bottom are very disconnected, and ESG needs the entire organization, like I said, billions of rows of data to get along. So it's more about convincing them that we are robust enough to make that. And sometimes people, like Karan said, it's even possible to do all this. They didn't even know that all of this stuff needs to be reported to the government, let alone tracked, managed, all of that stuff.
What are the common misconceptions around ESG? Because I know that a lot of people don't even have a fundamental understanding of ESG. What are those common misconceptions that y'all come across? What are those questions that are asked
Starting
of
on the
you?
ECG one, of course.
Correct. Starting from the ECG. So, what are those misconceptions you all deal with on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of, I think the biggest misconception or misdirection, more in a sense, that companies today have in terms of ESG and sustainability, right? I'd say it's starting to change, right? But they still look at ESG as a function or sub-function of another team, right? So in a lot of cases, you're going to see ESG be driven by a company secretary, right, or the CSR head of the organization, right, or you're going to have see it be outsourced, right, rather than companies actually having a CXO position for it, right, which is a chief sustainability officer, right? Because if you don't have a chief sustainability officer today, you're already behind, right? So misconceptions that really come in from a company come from a lack of leadership understanding, where ESG ये तो compliance है, SEBI को report देना है, right? And they don't look at it strategic. There's no internal ownership, right? Without that sort of coming in, even the best tools, right, like Breathe ESG, they don't come into play, right? Because there's very limited that you work that you can do. Because like I said, we solve high effort, low outcome objectives, right? But those high outcome objectives, that strategic leadership has to come internally. If your company secretary or your CSR guy is running your ESG and sustainability, right, you're not going anywhere.
I think that's Karan just nailed it. That's probably the biggest misconception and a very local misconception, because we operate in different markets, and I think India is the market where we've seen this pawning off happen in the past. I would say that it's very promising. A lot of people have realized you can't really do with even and another misconception is that a lean team cannot manage this. So that's why people end up giving it to an existing team, because they're like, hey, I already have a team, it has people, so let me add something onto their plate, because I don't think I can make a new team of 2 or 3 people to handle when I have 1,000, 1,500 person plus company, when that is not the case. So that is one big misconception. And I think another misconception people think is, hey, I'm not a manufacturing company. Why is ESG relevant for me? That's the biggest misconception we have, because people don't realize that it's very easy for manufacturing companies to calculate their emissions, whereas for all other companies, it's very difficult to calculate 70 to 95% of the emissions, making it all the more important for something like us to exist. Actually, we exist for those kind of companies who, when they eventually realize and come to us, we have the tools ready to calculate 70 to 95% of the emissions, which are coming from their value chains. For example, right, and I'm happy to name these companies because these are large examples you can draw parallels to, right? A company like a McKinsey or a company like Accenture, right? Because they are reporting well. Most of their footprint comes from the travel and hotel stay of their employees. You'd be surprised that even on a per revenue basis, they could be higher emissions than a lot of, let's say, manufacturing companies and things like that. Because again, these guys are flying business class. This has an effect on the emissions, right? Now, the misconception means that you're not even aware that you're probably doing worse than a company. You think, oh, they're burning coal, they must be worse than me. No, it's not. It's not necessarily like that. And there are a lot of ways to compare apples to apples. So sustainability, the misconception is that it applies to some industries. Actually, it applies to everybody in a different way. And value chains play a huge role in that. So that's another big one, I would say.
So I think the issue obviously here also is in terms of leadership. I think maybe last couple of years people have heard ESG at business conferences, or senior leadership has heard about it in some Harvard classes, and then they kind of come back and want to do it. But obviously, the lower down the chain, they've always got other priorities, and that needs to kind of come up the chain somehow. So, in your experience now, number one, which are the kind of types of companies you're seeing maximum interest from? And number two, which are those companies that you are able to impact the most? So, I mean, they may not necessarily be the same. Like, there's a general level of interest from some groups, and maybe in this case, it's manufacturing because the other guys are not even able to figure out that they need it. And in terms of, in your experience, who are you able to impact the most? That okay, you did something and they kind of felt the impact for whatever reason, better practices or easier to adopt or whatever it may be.
I think in terms of where we're getting interest from, Samiran, again, like you said, this is a new word, buzzword, whatever you want to call it, right?
Mhm.
I would say it's quite, I mean, from our side, it's very bullish. I wouldn't say that there's a single sector where we're not getting a good amount of interest. If I had to categorize it as to where, because you want to be laser focused, right? Sectors that have a massive global footprint. So auto components, right, where the thing could be made in Manesar or Pune and it's going into a vehicle in Brazil, right? These kinds of sectors which are hugely globally integrated. We've seen great. So auto components is one. Agrochemicals, which is the cute way of saying pesticides and fertilizers. Right, this is another massive sector for us. Right, steel. Again, there are other drivers, additional compliances, things like that. Steel has been a good sector for us, but a simple thumb rule would be that, of course, if it's a part of a massive global value chain or is a massive emitter locally, right? Definitely, they know that this is something that they have to do, and they would be interested in our solutions. In terms of where we make the most impact, Samira and Sheetal, I think first-time reporters, people who start early, we can make a huge impact because the traditional method of something like, and while ESG is a mandated mass scale thing, you've been saying, Samran, like let's say a Fortune 500 company, they've been doing it for a while. It was very manual, consulting driven, spreadsheet led, narrative focused. But what's happened, the current shift that's happened is multiple regulatory mandates. So it's no longer voluntary, right? California has one, EU has one, UAE has one, India has one, Australia has one, China has one. You get the picture. And all of these are data backed. All of these need to be audited, and all of these are data backed. So the reason why we make a lot of impact in first time reporters is in 1 year, we can take them to where something like 3 years or 5 years would have taken on a consulting led motion, right? Because your immediately baseline is kind of stable, and then it's up to you or your appetite of what leadership you want to take as a company, and all your gaps are visible. So to give you an idea, we've digitized, like in India also, we've digitized processes that used to be on registers, like with pen and paper, to something that's entirely automated. And on the last mile, to reduce their workload, also they're scanning a photo on their QR. They're seeing something on their phone in Hindi. They're pressing like 3 buttons, and everything is getting logged centrally. So, like maybe 120 to 130 people within a large manufacturing setup have been really empowered, and that's saving maybe 3,000, 5,000 hours a year for them. And this is what we can do for first-time reporters. With large companies, it's more of obviously streamlining their process. But the impact can be felt by people who didn't even know that they were not doing this.
So on an aside, so obviously this is a data intensive thing like anything else, and
Yeah.
it's obviously pulling from different places, and that seems to be the magic formula, or at least the magic ingredient that every system needs. Okay, right,
Yeah.
starting right from the SAPs, even to so-called AI systems and analytics systems and all of that. So.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, how are you kind of solving that data problem? Because I mean, most AI systems don't work because there is no data. So are you kind of uh, solving it in a different way, or are you getting dovetailed into some technology initiative which is also doing data rationalization, or is it coming from some other place? I mean, how are people kind of solving for this with you?
I think Satyan, you mentioned, and Karan, I'll let you also put in. I think you mentioned something cool when you said SAP earlier, because it's a good allegory to what we do. In fact, we have to connect with ERP systems in a lot of places. I think what's important with us, where it's slightly different from, like you said, these quote unquote AI tools, right? There's an age-old adage of garbage in equals garbage out, right? Which is the problem that is being created here. You have to understand, for 3 years, we were actually a sustainability data management solution. Now, our AI agents are essentially our features, which are now being used on behalf of the customer. So that gives us an added benefit. We're not kind of aimless with our AI journey, right? No pun intended. But more about taking what we already did and making it more efficient. Our primary goal, and when I say data management, right, is we actually give people the tools to collect data from the vast variety of sources that exist for ESG, because ESG is a catch-all term for your energy, water, waste, HR, compliance, right? There's probably 200 to 500 KPIs that a company needs to track. Where we help in solving this data ingestion problem is we have multitude of methods in which the data can be really put into the system, starting with something as simple as an integration. So when you mention SAP, let's say 30-40% of your data is in your ERP and HR system, right? We're directly fetching that data for you for your ESG purpose. It may have been for some XYZ reason. You may not be collecting the exactly right things, but if you have that system set up, add the fields into your current setup and just pipe it to us. You don't have to use our system. The second place, so that's like a more standard integration, been around for donkey's years using APIs. The second place where AI really comes in and helps is we've had OCR technology for a long time, but it's quite inaccurate, right? It doesn't read languages. But now with LLMs, that's not a problem, because LLMs are very good at taking something that's 60-70% correct and understanding what someone tries to mean. And funnily enough, the OCR technology is 60 to 70% correct in reading, right? So if you have a 2-layer image to text model, which is what we use, right? Now, actually what's happening is, like in India, for example, 29 states, each has a different type of utility bill. And then every provider has a different bill. So not only will it be in the regional language, but somewhere they'll give you the last 12 months information, somewhere they'll give you 1 month's information.
True.
Somewhere they'll give you the quantity and the value, but not the total. So you have to multiply it. Now, when people were entering it manually, right, extra zero, wrong value, wrong multiplication, but now our AI does that. So our AI is super smart. It calculates from unstructured values. It is actually doing this image to text. So that's also doing a bunch of heavy lifting for you. And then the final thing is, let's say, despite all attempts to remove the human in the middle, which is the best way to clean the data up, as we're discussing, right? And this includes integrating with hardware and stuff also, which we do, like IoT devices, Industry 4.0, as it's called, which we have also done. You just don't have it. Like, people don't have it. You need someone at the plant or site level to give you that data. In India, this is very practical. This is a majority case. We've made those user-friendly tools. So now we have a system of record where everything is validated, everything is up to a certain standard. Let's say we are creating those structured data sets for ESG for corporate India, for example. So we give the tools and we become that line of defense. Like, hey, don't use some inaccurate method. Use our system to come in and plug the data in a very user-friendly way, whether it's from Excel, whether it's from mobile, right, where all these validation tools are present. So across the board, we've created that ecosystem from multiple sources. So not only do you have the best fit available for you, but you can keep improving over time, because this is like a continuous journey for years. ESG, your first year, it's just a baseline, honestly. Like, your real improvements come 3 to 4 years later, tying back to your earlier question of the cost center, right? If you don't invest for 3 years, you're not even going to have a good impact on your ESG journey. So once that 3-year process is complete, we also provide the tools for them to upgrade. So that's the nuanced answer on the data question, Karan. I think you had some fun examples.
No, I think what's also very important is to understand the source problem for each customer and build according to that as well, right? So obviously we started off fairly simply. We have an open API architecture from day one, right? So we've been able to ingest data, like Shaayak said, from SAP and other systems. But in a lot of cases, right, that doesn't seem to work, right? And I can give you an example. So actually today I had a meeting with a Coworking giant, right? Now they have a very precise problem, which is, as opposed to a normal operator, right, who has their own assets in terms of having a factory, having their own offices, right? Or let's say a traditional real estate player that will own an entire asset. These guys own segregated floors within similar assets, sometimes half floors, right? And within each floor, in some cases, they're getting different bills and data points, right? So let's say if I have building A that has 10 floors, then this is a real example. The co-working player has about 8 floors in that asset, right? They are getting 3 bills, right? Because of 3 different DESCOM meters within a single floor, right? In addition to that, the DG uh, sort of bills that come to them again are also very different, right? So all in all, they get, I think, across 80 assets, about 630 odd different types of bills that they really need to read and process, which becomes a very, very complex process, because not only are you having to look at these different data points, but when it comes to tracking, right? I can't traditionally put down a single asset and track data, right, at an asset level. I actually need to go into a floor and then sub-floor level of categorization, right, to ensure that the data is coming in. So there's no garbage in, garbage out, and you have to be as granular as possible as well. What allows us to do that is also, at what we've done is we've had no third-party dependencies in terms of how we built out our product, right? So we built it ground up, right, fully in house. And a lot of what's available in the market, or a lot of what people do, is build wrappers around existing solutions, right? I'm wrapping around a Power BI, I'm wrapping around a Survey Monkey. And then you can't go into those granularities because those systems don't allow you to. So it's very important to, as Shaayak said, have diverse sources of data and have anomaly detection capabilities for that data. But it's also very, very important to be as granular as possible from the data, because it only works if you're going bottom up. You can't go top down.
I have a slightly different question for you guys, right? You're
Yeah.
you're building tech that automates sustainability tracking in some way, and you're using a lot of AI to do this. But the AI itself is very energy intensive. So how do you guys balance smart tools with keeping your own carbon footprint in check?
Yeah, I think this argument about sustainability is it's difficult to say it off the bat because you'll hear these kind of one-liners. Oh, what about the batteries in the EV cars? And is that really sustainable? First of all, to be very honest with you guys, a lot of these one-liners are funded by big fossil fuel. Unfortunately, I have to tell you that you've been hit by the propaganda. Another important part to take here is, yes, you have to be cognizant of, let's say, the water consumption of generative AI, which is actually massively concerning. But in the big picture, you have to think in terms of systems. All right. And the concept of systems thinking, which is what sustainability is built on, is there are trade-offs. Yes, it's not the best to dispose a lithium battery, but it's actually better than burning petrol for 15 years or 20 years, which is the life cycle, right? What is the emissions of what I'm doing currently, and what is the emissions of X thing? And is the overall emissions over the life cycle of that X thing, is it less or more, right? That's how I make a decision. And that's how I go on a decarbonization pathway. So it's a stepwise process. And again, you have to quantify practically. Sheetal, if every single customer of mine was using my generative AI features 24/7, day in, day out, right? My water consumption for the entire year would probably be a fraction of a percent of what the model creator is using in a single hour, to be very frank, in terms of compute. So I don't really take any stress or care, nor do I have any, let's say, eco anxiety with regards to that, because it's about the value that we're providing to the end customer. At the same time, the valid question on the overall optimization on what we're using is critical, because it's a lot about the application layer. So again, when it comes to the hardware layer, right, and providing the compute necessary, it's important because the overall, let's say, productivity improvement that AI will provide, right, that will help us definitely offset a lot of current labor and improve costs, improve outputs. At the same time, it's a trade-off that we're making, and especially in our case, right, we are helping the company overall remove its material consumption. So we would be looking to improve how AI is coming across the board to help them make these decisions. And then at a larger argument, if you're talking about that, definitely something where circularity and energy efficiency is coming into the picture. But I think that's NVIDIA's problem, or Cognizant, not Cognizant, but rather Anthropic and OpenAI's problem, not my problem.
So, Shaayak, and Karan, the thing is that you have this data layer issue, which you kind of have solved. Yeah. However, you have solved it, but there is the whole governance layer, which kind of you possibly cannot control. By governance, I mean regulation, not governance of the processes. So, because different countries have different regulations, and they are not necessarily homogenized. Because I think the right thinking or the correct thinking is still to be arrived upon, and nobody agrees. So, in the light of that, especially in the case of global supply chains, how are you able to then rationalize, or you kind of have to have different instances or different compliances for different countries? Because I'm assuming if it's a transnational company with different reportings in different countries, they may need to follow different rules and different systems. So, I mean, is there a way you have to harmonize, or is the current thinking that if you're UAE, you will get this report. If you're the EU, you will get this report. If you're India, you will get this report, and then there will be another management report that will give us some consolidated. I mean, how does the regulatory aspect of this get solved?
I think it's fairly straightforward, right? In an ideal world, we'd have one single regulatory framework that's standardized and everybody could report across. But you're absolutely correct in the way today how ESG reporting really works and how the governance structure also is. It's an alphabet soup, right? So I can be a listed Indian entity today that has to put out a BRSR report to SEBI, right? But I also might be exporting product to Europe, which might have me comply with CSRD and CBAM requirements, right? I might have a global presence with offices, let's say just a small office in California, which then makes me comply with their 253, 261 requirements, right? I might be in the UAE where I again have to comply with Decree 11, right? But what's really funny is that this alphabet soup, there's a lot of similarities as well, right? So there's a lot of overlapping data across these frameworks, while some factors continuously change, right? So for example, a BRSR might have a lot of inputs on CSR, right? Because CSR has been there in India forever, right? That's something that they want as part of the report, even though Indian companies already put out a CSR2 report, right? But in the UAE, it's fully focused on climate, right? So there can be a lot of differences, but there is also a lot of overlapping data for the core metrics or the core disclosures, right? Energy, water, waste, emissions, right? DEI, health and safety, right? These are some factors that are universal, right? So honestly, the best way to go about it is to just, again, I think at the end of the day, and I might sound repetitive, it does come down to data, right? If you do have a good centralized repository of data, right, you're able to comply with 40 to 60% of any global framework, right? And then obviously you need to sort of fill in the gaps for those differences. But yeah, ideally the ideal scenario is to have a singular global reporting framework.
Samran, actually, this is not a convergence, but a divergence that is happening right now, which is that every country has realized that, hey, I need to have my own regulation with regards to sustainability, because every country has realized that sustainability and climate is an important issue for the next, let's say, 20 years at least. Even to the fact that it's become politicized, right? It's become an issue on which elections are won or lost. So what happens over here is, like I mentioned, it's always been around as a more aspirational thing, right? And as we're shifting to a compliance thing, when it was aspirational, I used to go to a consultant and the consultant would charge me per report. So now that I have multiple compliances, essentially I'm still doing the same amount of ESG, but I'm paying triple because I have to file 3 reports. Now where somewhere like a software like us comes in is we are data first, reporting second, right? We tell our customers ESG starts where compliance ends. So essentially, we are helping them easier report to multiple frameworks, because that part that's similar, right? That the AI can't create. That part is, let's say, mapped on the back end to whatever report you have to create and just goes and populates. So you're just focused on tracking what's important for you as per your industry. Because if you go and ask some insurance company how many fatalities did you have in your assembly line, something like that, which is a very serious point, it's going to be zero. So you have to have that data backbone. And then our AI comes in as well. There's a whole qualitative part to reporting, which does change from country to country. Sometimes they ask you to explain policies, explain strategies, explain approaches, right? And that's where our AI helps them draft as well. So this multiple compliances is one of the pain points why a software like ours is required and needed now, because the companies have realized it's not smart to just go and do it one after the other, and rather have some sort of visibility and control over what you're doing.
So did you land up also building, or do you already have some kind of a self-diagnosis tool? And by that I mean that if I'm a company and I want to understand where I am in this ESG path or journey, or how good or bad I am, I kind of go on to the Breathe ESG website and fill out whatever to the best of my ability, and I get some, I don't know, a score or this thing, and which tells me something. So I'm just saying, do you have some kind of a little self-diagnosis thing, or is the process of engagement with you has to be a one-on-one thing? I mean, can anybody kind of go?
Samran, how we do this, again, because we primarily work with large enterprises, right? So most of our companies are 1 billion plus, so they usually have an idea of where they're at or what they want. It's not the best exercise, but what you're saying is something that they do for their suppliers. So rather what happens is our customer is using our platform to get those scores about its value chain. Yeah. So we are doing this in I would say a two-step process where, let's say, Sheetal is the biggest vendor to Samiran, right? And Samiran wants to find out if Sheetal is tracking her emissions, Sheetal is a certain set of policies, whether Sheetal is working on some strategies, right? Samiran could use my platform, and perhaps he would find out that Karantaj, who's another supplier to Samiran, is doing better on waste management than Sheetal is, or vice versa. You can and it goes pretty granular. Like, you can score them, you can ask them for evidence, things like that. So definitely that's a thing. But I think for us, because of the kind of folks we work with, this is something they want us to do for them. So that's how it ends up happening operationally, but 100% a real thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What are those real world challenges that you have kind of faced when you're implementing, all of these protocols for companies?
I mean, the challenges are fairly different depending on the type of customer also you're interacting with. Can be based on the nature of the company, right? Sometimes you're dealing with a fully desi company, right? It can be by the nature of industry as well, right? So like I said, Coworking or segregated data can tend to be very, very complex compared to, let's say, traditional manufacturing, right? But I guess there's some evident challenges that we face that are overarching across companies, right? And that can sort of, if I had to point to, let's say, one or two things, it could be, one is everything that these companies are currently doing today is smoke and mirrors, right? So they might have really nice sustainability sections on their website, but no sustainability report, right? In some cases, they might have a sustainability report, right? But there's not a lot of meat to it in terms of data quality, right? And that is something that becomes very difficult to fix, because that's mindset, right? That these companies have, where it's a lot of top down, and I don't want to call it greenwashing, but to an extent, it sort of gets there, right? And coming in to solve for something like that is fairly difficult if the stakeholder or the company itself, right, doesn't want to drive that internal change, right? And that's something that at least I feel I see quite often, right? In a lot of times, a customer will come to us, right, and those are customers that we also in a lot of cases turn away as well, right, is where they just want us to design a nice sustainability section for their website, right? Because that's not something that we do, and that's not something that we encourage it as well.
I think
That's interesting.
apart from
The sustainability section on the website. That's a nice one.
Yeah.
That's a nice requirement.
huge motivator, I would say that.
I mean, I can literally send you probably 10 links right now that you can open of companies that will have a sustainability section, right? That will say, oh, we care a lot about the environment. We are very nice towards our employees. And it's all text. You won't find one number.
Yeah.
So I must admit, I have been party to that because I used to run a content company, and we've written a lot of BRSR reports and sustainability reports. And sometimes you sit there and say, I'm just spinning words. Honestly, show me the data that you've made impact. There were one or two companies who'd really done the hard work. The rest of it, I thought, was just marketing of what little was done.
Yeah, I mean, publicly, if you just Google, let's say, Zomato ESG greenwashing, right? You'll see people be called out for this because Zomato did this, right? And it's public, so I can talk about it, right? But yeah, and those are things you avoid, because the second you get called out for it, then you have an issue, right? Same thing with Volkswagen, right? So you think about German company coming from Europe, right? You think that they wouldn't sort of engage in something like greenwashing, right? Just to make ridiculous claims, put in information that is not backed by evidence. That's something that is.
So that's so strange that you don't think it's important, so you don't do it, but you think it is important enough to greenwash.
Yeah.
So it's like, you don't want to see, it's obviously not important, so you don't do it. I get that. But you still want to be seen as doing it.
Yeah,
so then you go the other.
It's like T-Smart card, no? You think you're making a Oscar-worthy movie while you're pulling a heist.
So let me ask you this slightly weird question. Each country has its own expectations of disclosures and things like that. And sometimes when I read about those, right, and when I'm doing research on policy and things like that, I think to myself, why are you even asking for this? Are there some disclosures that you'll have come across, maybe around the globe, not just India, which you think are completely useless? Why is the government even asking for these disclosures? And why is a company having to waste time trying to figure out what these disclosures are?
I think I won't say that there's any one disclosure that's right or wrong. It's more about horses for courses, right? If you kind of implement a broad-based regulation, right, then a lot of times companies are going to skirt around it because they'll just read the first 50% and be like, none of this applies to me. So they'll ignore that other 50% that does apply to them. So I would not say that anyone is, at the end of the day, this is a market that we support. We want countries to ask people to disclose more, even if it's a little harder currently, because it's easier to start it and then make it more streamlined. But somewhere where folks can do better is maybe attuning it to either the size of the company or the industry, because it can be tough for smaller players, and it also can be tough for people without the awareness right now to connect it. So one size fits all implementation is something that doesn't work. And I would say people have learned also. So when you look at how it's been implemented in India, SEBI started with BRSR Sheetal, and that was for listed companies. So it's the same thing for everybody, but that's still top down. So it was still okay, because even then those companies are of that size where they have to go and report this data to be internationally viable and attractive to investors. Now what's happened is, based on what India learned from that, which is that companies were not really matching it, India is one of the pioneers of doing sector-specific, I would say, implementation of sustainability regulations. So the regulation that's followed, especially in the last 12 months or so, is extremely sector-specific. So it's gone almost the other way, where India has its own guidelines for its own companies in that sector to go ahead and calculate. And something that even RBI is pushing that, hey, let us make something. So there's definitely room to learn, and the way to do it is trying not to be so broad based. But I don't want to call out anyone specifically, because I'd rather they do it and then learn from their mistakes than not.
Fair.
story industries.
So in terms of improvement seen post, like a before after, is it too early to pass judgment, or is it? I mean, have you seen that in actual companies now? I mean, in your experience, I mean, one is of course published data, but in the companies you've worked with, are they just in too much of an infancy that you can't say, or have they companies that over a period of time, once they've identified that this is my emission issue, this is where I'm doing, this is where I'm going wrong on employee, this is where I'm going water, blah blah, and in the next maybe 2 or 3 years they have started doing something where there is an improvement, or I mean anything that's kind of pushed the needle?
No, I think it's fairly tangible, right? Again, so when you look at sustainability in ESG, right, when you look at it from a reporting perspective, also look at it at the same way that you look at, let's say, a financial report, right? You're reporting numbers for a particular FI. The objective is to increase top line over the next year,
True.
improve your margins, right? Get better profitability. It's the same with sustainability, right? Rome wasn't built in a day, and then there are year-on-year improvements that you can see. So publicly available information, you can go check out one of our customers, WeWork, right? That we work with. They have set in very, very tangible targets, right? That they have already made very good progress across. So we started working with WeWork back in 2023, right? So it's in a very short period of time, about 2 years, right? They've set a target, for example, for 20 liters of water consumption per occupant per day, right? They have now put aerators across almost all assets, right, and WeWork locations to reduce that level of water consumption, right? So that is just one tangible outcome I can think of at the top of my head. That's also fairly well publicly disclosed. That's backed by numbers, right? That's tangible in the sense that if you actually walk into a WeWork facility, you can see the aerators and the difference in water pressure, right, when you're using a tap. So it's very real, right? It's out there, it's tangible, it's tracked, it's managed, right? And it may seem like an easy fix, but doing that across 65 assets, right, with multiple floors, each different levels of bathrooms, right, kitchens that you're sort of managing, it's not the easiest, and it's not.
And it's additional investment also, right? I mean, because then somebody has to think about that. You know, one is to get it, but to get that result, you have to put in money. I mean, it's not going to come for free.
Yeah. And they pay it forward as well, right? So WeWork, for example, outside of, let's say, this, they also have a sustainability summit every year that they've started, right? This year was their biggest, where they're not just driving it themselves as an organization, but they actually
all
drive
the tenants
it across their tenants, their suppliers, their different stakeholders.
Yeah, I think Samiran, you spoke about the capex heavy aspects. Like, it's true that some sustainable initiatives can be cost heavy, especially upfront, but that's where the entire data and finance angle comes back in, because this is how it's being incentivized. They are actually pushing folks to report on their sustainability so that companies can take targets and essentially show, this is my performance, this is my target. And then when they go and take that loan for that particular investment, right, it's justified and then it's incentivized, meaning your cost of capital gets significantly lowered. And actually, if your performance is really good, so what Karan was referring to, which is sustainability linked lending, which already exists in India as well, right, is if my performance is really good and I'm actually meeting my targets, I can actually get a lower cost of capital and then use it for anything. I don't need to use it for my sustainability initiatives because I'm already performing well. Based on that, I'm actually getting rewarded, to put it very simply. I'm actually getting rewarded for that when my interest rate is getting low just for my debt on the whole, which you can imagine and this can be up to 100 basis points like that. Even a 50 to 100 basis point haircut on a loan, right, can be incredible when the loan volume is in thousands of crores. So this is the kind of difference that it makes, and definitely even the cost part is being subsidized because it has to be pushed.
It's not just that, Shaayak. It's also the operational efficiency that comes with it, right? So
100%.
Upfront, you look at it and it's capital expenditure that these guys have done, but down the line they're reducing their water consumption significantly to a level where they're going to save money, right?
Got it.
So their operational efficiency, financial sort of benefits, as well as, like you said, access to the right instruments, also from a funding perspective, are available.
Yeah, definitely. And another important part is that emissions only come from energy consumption, and energy is usually the biggest cost center for any, let's say, hardware or electricity intensive business. So what we also do is we are providing a completely different lens into your business operations for cost saving. I think another thing that people don't realize, like our customers, a lot of them, uh, they didn't realize. So refrigerants, which is essentially what is used to refill your ACs, right? These are essentially chlorofluorocarbons, to put it very simply. And to again explain it in the terms of carbon emissions, right? 1 kg of refrigerant essentially can be thought of as equivalent to 14,800 kg of CO2. That's how much worse it is in terms of global warming potential. And these systems are closed systems, meaning that when you refill it, it actually means that there's a leak. Now, some of our customers were just filling their ACs over time because obviously it has to work. You have a business, you have to create those conditions.
Correct.
They didn't realize that all of the emissions are coming from there, and that can be a cost center as well as a source of emissions. But only when you look at it from this lens do you care. Otherwise, you're just refilling a few kilograms of refrigerant in your old system. You're not going to think twice about it. So that's another huge part about how this is becoming relevant now, is to move people off these processes. You can't basically hide away from the impact of a lot of these things that you're already doing.
Yeah, we also have a company that's in real estate now that's putting a lot of additives within the chillers, right? And that's brought down their sort of carbon dioxide by, I think, close to 40%, right? By just a fairly simple, low cost measure that they can implement. So honestly, yeah, it's fairly straightforward to manage some of these considerations. It's not as complex as it sounds.
I love the way you say it's fairly straightforward. I wish that was truly the case. But, we could continue to have this conversation for much longer. I think we haven't even realized where the hour has gone past. And I thought we should end on this note. We'd love to have you guys over again to talk more about this. But it was an absolute pleasure having this conversation with you, because every time, I might look at, the reports we write again in a completely different lens.
Yeah.
When I write them, though I don't write as often as I did earlier. But yeah, it absolutely fun. Great having both of you here. We're a fun tech podcast, so I'm sorry I have to add a bit of fun to this. Not that it hasn't been a fun conversation, but thought we should end it on a slightly lighter note, because ESG can be a little overwhelming for people who are not used to talking about ESG. So we're going to do a rapid fire round with the two of you. We're going to ask you the same question, so you can decide who's going to go first, but we're going to ask you to answer 5 questions for us. And your answers don't have to be more than 10-15 seconds long. So who wants to go first?
Shaayak,
I think that is
I was going to nominate you, bro.
Okay, now that y'all have both decided that the other one is better to start with, first let's do it this way, okay? Same question, first one answers, then the other one answers. And for the next question, we flip it around.
We'll flip it, yeah.
Yeah, does that make sense? Okay, super. So one word that describes your morning before an investor pitch, and one word after it.
Shaayak, you taking this?
No, we go alphabetically order for the first one. It's fine.
All right. So I think probably before the investor pitch, there's a lot of nervousness. And then after the investor pitch, there's, depending on how it goes, there's a lot of relief or anxiety.
Yeah,
Or more nervousness.
I think that depending how it goes is important. I would say before the investor pitch is coffee, and after the investor pitch is beer. That's a good way to frame it, but not always. I would say that.
Okay.
Sometimes it's coffee after also.
Okay. Okay. Favorite tech tool you can't live without, and one you secretly wish we never had.
I don't think I can live without ChatGPT. And one that I wish never existed. It's probably also ChatGPT.
Nice.
Okay.
I think for me, something I can't live without today is probably Canva. So I came from a consulting background, PPTs, etc. I had to do a lot of unlearning, and now I'm too used to Canva to switch to anything else. And something I wish that didn't exist, probably my PlayStation, was quite addicted. And if it didn't exist in the first place, it saved me a lot of time.
Okay. If an ESG person was sitting in your office, what would they be like? A Zen monk? Sorry, let me rephrase this. If ESG was a person sitting in your office, would it be a Zen monk, an over-enthusiastic intern, a know-it-all consultant, or something else altogether? So I'm asking you to personify ESG.
I'd pick the over enthusiastic intern.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. I see where you're coming from. If I had to personify ESG, I would probably personify it as there's that one righteous uncle, right? Everyone has that one righteous
Nice.
who's like, so you know what they're saying is true, but sometimes they can really ask you a lot, and you're like, hey, can we tone it down? So I would maybe personify it as that currently, but you still know he's right. So
Which Bollywood or Marvel villain would make the best chief sustainability officer?
I think Karan is the right guy to answer this.
Yeah, this one's fairly simple. It'd probably be Thanos, right? I mean, the
Oh
concept.
God.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? So think about the concept and idea, while radical from a sustainability standpoint, made a lot of sense.
But effective.
You're looking at far lesser emissions. You're looking at a lot more resource access. You're looking at a better quality of life, right? And just the snap of a finger. So, yeah.
So I had this radical idea about cleaning Earth by sending everybody to Mars for 50 years, So this is sounding almost like that.
Yeah,
I was
this
just
is
going to say, Karan, you and Samiran are on board on the same one. Samiran wants to be Thanos. Shaayak, I know you covered your face, but let me tell you that every movie nowadays is about eradicating 50% of the world. And I think COVID was planned to do that, but it didn't happen. So
Wow, that is a super conspiracy theory.
Yeah, for geopolitical reasons, I will refrain to comment on this matter. But I think if I had to say a villain that would be like a CSO, just to make it funny, I think it would be Gabbar Singh, right? Because it's like an anti-villain. They're not actually a villain, but they can definitely be rounding up the troops. Other people in the company might feel like they're against them, but they're like a likable villain, right? It's not.
Gabbar Singh, a likable villain.
I think he was.
He likes the other
Which
villains,
character do you
but that
remember the
doesn't make
most?
you a likable villain.
Which character?
Why don't you ask Thakur how likable Gabbar was?
Okay, and my last one. If you had to put a tech tattoo that symbolizes Breathe ESG's mission, what would it be? And where would you put it?
I don't know, tree with like wires for roots, because it's sustainability. Probably have it somewhere visible, forearm.
Okay. Shaayak?
Sorry, I'm not too creative with this one.
No, that's not good. I was just going to say we'll put decarbonize on our foreheads so that everyone can.
We decarbonize on?
On his forehead.
Oh, I was actually thinking you're going to start branding your clients or something. You just go around with a stamp.
No, it saves me so much talking. I'll just do this and then,
I always put another word on my forehead, Shaayak, when I'm frustrated and whatever, but that was not the word I was thinking of. But anyway,
I don't know how to put that. It'll have the opposite of the intended effect.
Okay, that was fun. Sorry, I had to bring a little bit of lightheartedness because we are a fun tech podcast and I had to do that. Thank you so much, guys. It's absolutely wonderful having you both here today. And thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for making the time. Thank you.
Thanks, guys, for having us.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.